Breaking news from Westminster has left millions of disabled people in the UK anxious, uncertain, and demanding answers. The Department for Work and Pensions, now under the leadership of Labour's Liz Kendall, is facing fierce criticism, accused of ignoring the very voices it claims to represent, as plans to shake up disability benefits like personal independence payment and universal credit begin to take shape. But instead of clarity, disabled Britons are being met with confusion. And instead of compassion, some say they are being handed cuts. It all began with a heated exchange in Parliament. Liberal Democrat MP Steve Darling didn't hold back. With the eyes of disabled people across the nation watching closely, he asked a simple, searing question: why did you ignore disabled people? The silence that followed was deafening. But then came the response. Ms. Kendall, firm and visibly under pressure, pushed back against the charge. "Forgive me for not agreeing with the characterization you put forward," she said. "I have never started with pound signs or spreadsheets." Yet outside the House of Commons, many are asking, if the DWP isn't focused on cuts, then why are so many disabled people terrified of losing the benefits that help them survive? Because behind the political statements and the defensive sound bites lies a growing fear, one that the government's sweeping reform agenda is quietly being driven by budgetary constraints, rather than lived experience. And the numbers don't lie. Talks of potential cuts to PIP and Universal Credit support benefits that serve as lifelines for those living with long-term health conditions and disabilities have sparked outrage from charities, disability rights organizations, and everyday people struggling with the cost of living crisis. Kendall insists she's not ignoring anyone. They will be at the heart of the TIMS review, she says. But what is this review? Who is leading it? And more importantly, why does it feel like disabled people have been left out of the room while decisions are being made about their lives? She speaks of shifting resources, of needing to invest in jobs, skills, and health, instead of continuing to funnel billions into what she calls the costs of failure. But for those who rely on these benefits day in and day out, who use them to pay rent, keep the heating on, or afford essential care, this language cuts deep. Because what happens when you take away support before the alternatives are in place? What happens when someone who cannot work is suddenly told they must? What happens when benefits are scaled back in the name of long-term reform, and the people affected are already barely making it through the month? For decades, the British welfare system has been both a safety net and a battleground. Governments from all parties have pledged reform, saying they want to help people live better lives. But to many watching today, it feels like that promise is slipping further out of reach. And the stakes have never been higher. Under the Conservatives, the DWP was already under fire for disability assessments, benefit sanctions, and underpayments. Now, with Labour at the helm, many hoped for a more compassionate approach, a true partnership between the state and disabled citizens. But so far, for many, that hope feels misplaced. Because this isn't just about spreadsheets or policy reviews. This is about real people, millions of them, who wake up every day in pain, in poverty, or in fear of what tomorrow might bring. People who, instead of being empowered, feel like they're being punished. And in Parliament, the pressure mounted further. Mr. Darling didn't let up. Twice he asked why the voices of disabled people were left out of the conversation. Twice, Ms. Kendall denied the accusation. "We are not ignoring disabled people," she repeated. But the tone was defensive. The reassurance didn't land. Because in truth, it's not just about being heard, it's about being trusted. It's about knowing that when your life is on the line, the people in charge of your support are listening, engaging, and acting with transparency. And so far, that hasn't happened. Ms. Kendall argued that the department is at the sharp end of deep-rooted national problems: poverty, unemployment, a failing healthcare system. She's not wrong. The DWP has long been the last stop in a broken chain of public services. But many are asking, is that a reason to cut support or a reason to strengthen it? She insists that the current benefit system is propping up failure. That too much money is spent maintaining poverty, and not enough is going toward the solution: better health, more jobs, and higher skills. That might sound reasonable. But for someone housebound due to chronic illness, for someone waiting 6 months for a disability assessment, or someone forced to reapply for PIP after years of mental health trauma, those promises mean little if the safety net is pulled out from beneath them in the meantime. And the fear is real. Many disabled claimants already feel under siege. They've endured cuts to disability premiums. They've navigated hostile assessments and tribunal appeals. And now, with more changes looming, the anxiety is rising again. And it's not just about PIP. The DWP is also under growing pressure to release a comprehensive child poverty strategy, another cornerstone of public welfare policy that many say is being quietly neglected. When challenged on this in Parliament, Ms. Kendall again tried to calm the storm. "We want to get this right," she said, explaining that the strategy had funding implications and required careful planning. But Mr. Darling was not convinced. "You are very well avoiding it," he replied. "Why haven't you published the child poverty strategy?" No clear answer was given. Just another promise. Another delay. And while ministers talk, children across the UK go to bed hungry. Families struggle to put food on the table. And disabled people lie awake, wondering what the next letter from the DWP will say. The truth is, this country is at a crossroads. We are witnessing the early stages of a potential reimagining of the welfare state. The government says it wants to reduce dependency, cut fraud, and create opportunity. But in practice, many fear it is doing the opposite, shrinking support, tightening eligibility, and failing to engage with those most affected. Disability charities have sounded the alarm. Advocacy groups have demanded answers. And still, too many decisions are being made behind closed doors. The DWP says it will listen. But the question remains, who are they listening to? Because the people outside Whitehall, the people living this reality, aren't asking for luxury. They are asking for dignity. For basic security. For their voices to be heard, not after policies are written, but before. If the TIMS review is to mean anything, it must be inclusive. Transparent. Grounded in lived experience. Because without that, no reform will ever be truly just. As the debate rages on, one thing is clear: the future of disability benefits in the UK is uncertain. And the trust between disabled people and the government hangs in the balance. And it's not just disabled individuals who are worried. Carers, families, and frontline workers are watching this unfold with a sense of growing dread. These aren't abstract reforms being tossed around in parliamentary debates. These are real-world decisions that could decide whether someone heats their home, or gets the care they need to survive. For years, personal independence payment has helped bridge the gap for people who face extra costs because of illness or disability. Transport. Equipment. Home adaptations. It isn't a luxury, it's a lifeline. Universal credit, while often controversial, has been a last resort for many, especially during COVID and the economic shocks that followed. Now, both of these core systems seem to be on the table for radical overhaul. But at what cost? Critics argue that the government is walking a dangerous tightrope, one where reform is used as a cover for cost-cutting, and where efficiency becomes another word for erosion. How can we talk about reducing PIP spending when nearly half of disabled adults already live in poverty? How can we suggest universal credit claimants simply get into work, when a vast proportion of disabled recipients face barriers that make regular employment impossible? And while DWP ministers speak of better outcomes, many disabled people are still trapped in a cycle of endless reassessments, mandatory reconsiderations, and appeals, often having to relive trauma just to prove they are still unwell. There's a deep disconnect between the language of Westminster and the reality on the ground. What's being called reform in Parliament often feels like a fight for survival in ordinary households. The rhetoric about building a better life rings hollow when thousands are left waiting for backdated payments, or having their conditions questioned by assessors with no medical qualifications. As the debate rages on, one thing is clear: the future of disability benefits in the UK is uncertain. And the trust between disabled people and the government hangs in the balance. Will ministers rise to the moment? Will they deliver a system built not on suspicion, but on support? Or will more vulnerable people be left to pay the price of political miscalculation? We'll be watching.